So this is really sad right here. I saw this article and I was looking at it, and the whole thing has been sad. And I really don't have any words except just all of it is just really sadness. So this just adds to what has already happened, and it's what makes me say the word sad is because a lot of this, it's like we're in the year of 2022, but a lot of what we're seeing is, you know, another form of racial terrorizing. Um, with this Buffalo incident that happened in New York, and so this yet just adds more of um, to a really bad situation that has really been historically going on for I don't know how long. I mean, we can go on and on and on down the list of some of the events that have happened, and not just some. I mean, thousands. I would say thousands, maybe even more than thousands. So, this article is out of the Washington Post, and this is by Jacob. Um, said his name under here, Jacob Bogage. And so I was looking at it, and it's just really sad. And so Buffalo's east side was a food desert, and so the shooting, it made things a lot worse. So apparently there's a food shortage in the area where the people had been gunned down and murdered in Buffalo, New York, on the east side. And so this is showing a still photo of a food distribution. I believe that's what's going on. Free food pickup. So the people are still going through a lot after what has happened, and it just seems like it's a really sad situation. So Buffalo, New York, Route 33 tears through the heart of Buffalo East Side. It's a scar in a segregated city that nearly demolished a black community. And so when I saw the first beginning of this article, it mentioned highways and freeways. Um, and I know that I had read something that said that a lot of these freeways, you notice that people complain about the traffic and the pollution and how it has created a lot of problems with climate change, with all these cars and people backed up on the road and accidents, and the very freeways that some of us are driving on were the biggest contributors to erasing black communities. And so here it says the highway that devastated the economies of Black Buffalo's commercial centers, and it sucked value from historic real estate, spitting grime and grease onto the windows of neighboring homes. So that was another form of trying to break up black communities and neighborhoods, is to build freeways right through neighborhoods. And so a lot of these freeways that people are complaining about, that say they're congested, and they've created a lot of traffic jamming, and they've done more harm than good in some instances when it comes to climate change. Those are the freeways that have been put up to basically erase some of the color communities, or communities of color. And it's sad because some of the stuff that I was reading, it was like Wow, we are riding on those freeways today and we don't even realize that's how that even started. And that was a way to like break up communities and displace people. They use those tactics to basically people would you'd have I heard stories where people had actually owned homes. These weren't apartments, and they were telling them they had to leave because they were building a freeway overpass or a freeway, a road right where their home is. And I was like, wow, how could you do this? And so that just tells you that, people will try to do whatever they can to show their hatred. And even if it means using ways to twist the law, or if it means using different organizations and groups to try to get together and rally to try to destroy homes, displace people. I mean, they have all kind of ways of doing it. And so this right here is just like it brought back that what I had read, and it this was one of the places. This was one, but one of many places. It said that it devastated the economies of the Black Buffalo commercial centers and sucked value from historic real estate. And don't they talk about having not having enough homes and a lot of homelessness and all of this, and the very things that they were doing contributed actually has contributed to what we're experiencing now. And so so it's saying the east side where the black population, it says here, has concentrated for more than 70 years. So is him in by Main Street to the west and Eggert Road to the east. And so Route 33, it cuts a gnarly nash between the two. And so the effect is a community stuck in what locals describe as a cycle of poverty and neglect. And so then I believe what that meant is when you make those roads or you cut people off from places that where it's jobs and it's food and um, you know decent places to live, then it leaves them in areas that maybe it's harder to get to the store or it's harder to get to the doctor or the hospital, or it's the schools are not that great and maybe you have to walk further to go to a better school. um, it creates a lot of problems, and then you have poverty on top of that, and then like they say, neglect. So those neighborhoods, they don't put money in those communities because they've basically um, distance themselves from communities of color. And these stories are not fake. These stories, I've it's just so sad. These stories are actually really happening even till this day. You have communities where they're always trying to scramble to figure out how are we going to fix the roads? How are we going to put more teachers in the school? How are we going to, get more housing? Why is there so much poverty? Why is there so many people homeless? And you tend to see more people that are of color, that are without adequate housing and displaced. And so this is just yet another um, validation for what has been happening. And then you have these terrible incidences of this gunman who opened fire at a Tops Friendly Market grocery store on Jefferson Avenue. This was May 14th, killing 10 shoppers and employees, and so all of whom were black, and injuring three more. He was 18 years old. He was a white man that was charged for that crime and murder of all those people. And so a week later, another horrible incident happens. So this was in Texas. An 18-year-old in Uvalde, Texas, shot dead 19 students and two teachers at an elementary school before he was killed by the police authorities over Memorial Day weekend. And so there were 15 more mass shootings, according to the Gun Violence Archive, marking a bloody start for another American summer. And so summer has just begun, or is just beginning, and already, even after the Buffalo incident and the incident that happened in Texas, um, there was something that happened in Philadelphia, something that happened in Tennessee, another shooting. There was a shooting that had happened in a hospital. There has been so many more shootings that like back to back, and they're so close together. So Buffalo locals say it is a poignant case study of some of the worst aspects of the country's gun violence epidemic. And so investigators say that the Buffalo slayings here were motivated. That one in particular was motivated by a racist hate, and the alleged gunman purchased his weapons legally in Pennsylvania when he did this. And so locals say that the attacks feel like a symptom of generations of destructive policies in Buffalo. And so now it has worsened. Another persistent problem with its main grocery store being closed on the east side is running low of food. And so now we like to call this food apartheid, is what they call it. So because of the absence of the grocery stores is a reflective of the range of policy choices and decisions that the public and private sectors leaders made. And this was said by Henry Louis Taylor Jr., professor of urban planning in the University at Buffalo. And so the consequences of not having the store open, this Queen Nia Ashima, a local activist, is going to be a greater than what we call or can all imagine. So there is so much need. Andrea Camucci, senior pastor at Rehoboth House of Prayer, a Buffalo church. So I may not have said all the names correct, so sorry for that. So, and it didn't just start with the shooting on Saturday. So there's a quote. Alexander Wright, who runs the African Heritage Food Co-op in Niagara Falls, said that the folk or the fork will kill you faster than the bullet. Okay, so and here in Buffalo, we're experiencing both the fork and the bullet. And so it's the struggle. It's a struggle that reveals larger challenges for urban black communities across the U.S. So still struggling with the impacts of redlining, which redlining has not gone away. Let me run that back for you. Redlining, before, you actually could see a line that was red on the map, and it had defining lines that showed you neighborhoods. Those things have not disappeared. That you might not see the red line, but you feel the red line. You know areas you can afford to live in and areas you can't afford to live in, and you might have to pay a lot more money, or they don't want you in those areas and you feel unwelcome when you go over there. They find excuses to try to get you out. If you can afford it, they'll try to make your stay there an uncomfortable one. Let's say that. So it often the redlining, it often blocked minorities from home ownership and urban renewal projects that tore up existing neighborhoods and depressed wages, and poverty um, persists, of course, but and property values. Okay, and so the tough economic conditions led businesses to locate in more affluent areas where consumers had made more spending power, opening the door for others that experts consider predatory. And so the East Side is a community of about 130,000 people. So it has four major grocery stores, according to the Washington Post analysis, and a couple dozen smaller stores with more limited selection. So Tops was the only major grocery store within Route 33. And so one of the few places on the east side for the residents to fill prescriptions, another service that's supplied in chronically underserved areas. And so that was very much needed. So weighted by the population. So the Buffalo majority, um, white areas have 22% more pharmacies than the majority black areas. So if you pay close attention to the makeup of the communities, you could tell by the grocery stores, by the pharmacies, by the doctors, the healthcare, if they have more of those things to their access and uh, at their disposal for whatever it is that they need. And if the commute is further to have to go to those places, or shorter in some instances, in some communities where they have things more closer and more plentiful for them to use and access. And so I know I've been to communities where it may not be predominantly a black community, and there'll be more better selection in grocery stores. The pharmacies are more you know closer. Uh, Everything is the food seems clean, everything seems fresher and cleaner. In certain areas when you go into grocery stores, I'm like, wow, this is sad. And then when you go into areas where it's more people of color, their food selection is not that great, and it's usually a lot of high in fat, high in carbs, high in everything that things that aren't good for you, and there's not enough a selection of healthy choices. And so we notice that, and then you have to go running around to find first. Well, but of course you'll see, I think there's Rite Aid, there's CVS, and then there's Walgreens. And so those stores tend to be the stores that are pharmacies, but a lot of times there's a lot of theft that goes on in those stores because you have homeless people and things like that who pretty much been, that's everywhere, of course, and they tend to go into those stores. And so when they have like a high number of theft, the stores that need those pharmacies the most, they end up closing. And so they don't have as much security either. And so there's big problems all around. So I've noticed that. So Buffalo's majority white areas have 22% more pharmacies than its major black areas, according to the post analysis that was gathered by the market research firm Data Axle. And so even before the shooting, Buffalo's east side was a food desert. And so it's just like what I was saying. Like I noticed some of the stories. Like I'll go to like stores like here in LA. If you go to like Miracle Mile, that's like when you're going to, that's the more affluent. That's like Beverly Hills, like when you go into Westwood, and you could go to the same grocery store, Ralph's. The food selection, everything is just excellent because of the neighborhood. But then when you go to like areas, it'll be a Ralph store, and you go to South LA and you see some of the Ralph stores, the food selection is not that great. The store is smaller, they don't have enough baskets. It's crazy. And it's like this doesn't make any sense. And then when you need service, they'll have like 20 registers, and they'll have like only two registers open and two people working the registers. It just doesn't make them. And you have these long lines, and people are hot and sweaty, and they've been waiting for a long time to check out. So I noticed the difference, like when I go to like Culver City and I go to the pavilion store. You got all these checkers, all these the grocery lines go faster. The food selection is a lot better. They got a deli, they got a hot bar, they got all kinds of stuff in there. Sushi, they got a sushi chef. You go to the stores in South LA, you don't find none of that stuff hardly. Or if you do, you'd be lucky on a good day. you know, I don't know. It's very limited. Put it that way. It's not as dressed up or fancy. And so even before the shooting, they said that it was a food desert. So in the term that is used to describe areas with a lack of convenient affordability and healthy food choices, especially fresh fruits and vegetables. That's what I've noticed. Finding nutritious food is so difficult, and residents said that this shock to the local commerce could force thousands of households towards hunger. And so elected officials, civil rights leaders here have pledged to hold accountable not just alleged shooter, Peyton Gendron is his name, but also the right wing figures who inspired his attack. And so the gun makers and the distributors and social media platforms that they say that enabled the whole thing. And so some of the locals see another accomplice, one that has bolstered Buffalo's racial division. The 33 is what it's called. So how did this guy know to come to this grocery store? Said the activist David Lewis. He researched it and he found it out, and where we all live here, and then that's because we're segregated, and so that's another form of the racial terrorism. And so I live in front of a chasm, and so to know Buffalo's East Side is to know its minor celebrities. So in a past life, Steve O. Johnson, a character, or a charter school, I said a character, charter school teacher. He helped style Mary J. Blige's Sojourner Cook, the First Lady of Macedonia. Missionary Baptist Church is a trained opera singer and performed backup for Jennifer Hudson. So these are people that probably were in the areas that we know today as being famous singers and celebrities. And so Carol Horn, a former police officer, stopped a white officer in 2006 choking a black detainee. She was fired for her actions and then beat back her dismissal in a lawsuit that was resolved in 2021. So there's a reason that they're all living here. And so the Great Migration, if you've ever heard of that, anybody, some people have and others don't know. They're too young to know or don't know the history, but there was a Great Migration. It was brought black families to Buffalo shortly after the Civil War and then again in massive numbers after World War II. And so they settled on the east side. This was said by a Taylor urban studies professor because that was the city's industrial hub. So they worked and lived alongside mostly white European immigrants, sometimes in the same boarding houses. So there's evidence, Taylor said. So that's blacks taught themselves to speak and write German to better communicate with the neighbors and the co-workers. So eyeing the post-war suburban boom in 1950s, area political leaders planned a highway, so Route 33 connecting downtown Buffalo to a new airport built in the white suburbs. So they chose to run it through the east side because it had the lowest property values. So Taylor said a common metric urban planners use when they decide where to place major infrastructure projects without disrupting civic life. So the choice may not have been racially motivated, Taylor said, but disproportionately it harms black Buffalonians nonetheless. And so they claim that it wasn't racially motivated. That's not what I read. I read that they deliberately picked those communities and they know what communities they're picking to put those freeways and infrastructure in there. They know it's the poor black communities or communities of color because they figure you don't have any power and you don't have a voice and you probably won't be able to say anything about it. So so blacks were largely concentrated on the east side because of existing financial and legal restrictions on housing. Does that sound familiar? It seems like what's going on today hasn't changed much. So city leaders dug out part of the Humboldt Parkway, a historic and scenic green strip that connected the city's park system for the highway's route. And so it slices through the neighborhood, creating a path of destruction and devaluation, Taylor said. And so the tearing up of the parkway would not have happened if it had been in a white community. Get it? And so this was added by New York Assembly Majority Leader Crystal D. People Stokes, the Democrat, of course, who represents the East Side, which I have to agree. A lot of that does happen because of who they're doing it to. So it says, I live in front of the chasm. The Emir Nevis, a food security activist whose home borders Route 33. Weekly, she scrapes a solidified scum from the exhaust pipes of the windows of her oversized porch. And so it was a colossal of what they did, and it was idiocracy. And so, as the food runs low, neighbors mobilize. So, the morning after the shooting, Buffalo East Side needed to eat. So, at a prayer vigil, volunteers arrived with dozens of Paula's donuts and an iconic sweet treat here. So, two neighborhood safety groups called the Peacemakers and Buffalo Fathers armed together, helping to educate, restore, and save is what it's called, started a cookout, flipping burgers and hot dogs to help people on the three-sided grill. So we'll be here as long as it takes for the supermarket to reopen again. So this was said by Lenny Lane, a retired firefighter and co-founder of the Fathers. And we don't know how long it will take, but we're not going to the way back the way it was. So it can't be just a new coat of paint. And so inside the Family Dollar next door across Landon Street, the mood was more desperate. So one mother looked at the milk and the eggs, the fresh fruit, and the children, her children, and another asked the cashier if the store sold chicken or beef, and it did not. So another customer asked for help identifying what food items they could buy with their money. So some supplemental nutritional assistance programs or food stamps. I don't know, the cashier said. So this is not the way. What we usually do. So neighbors with cars, reliable public transportation is not a given here. It took friends they took friends to McDonald's less than a mile away on Main Street. So Tops set up a shuttle to take shoppers to the East Side Tops, and so to another in North Buffalo with the offer the but the offer locals said that it was very enticing, but the shuttle ran only a few times an hour and off back drop people off back at Jefferson Avenue, leaving customers to haul the groceries back home. So it's harder for them even more now to try to get the groceries that they need. So by Tuesday, World Central Kitchen is what it's called, the food relief agency run by celebrity chef Jose Andres arrived to hand out hot meals on the corner of Jefferson Avenue and East Utica Street, a major intersection that's there. And so locals work for long term relief. And so officials have promised relief and soon. So TOPS spokeswoman Kathleen Sauter said that in an email statement that the store was dedicated to resuming service on the east side as soon as possible, but executives still don't know when that will be. So law enforcement has closed the building indefinitely. It's not going to open it anytime soon. So to investigate the shooting, and so our engineers and construction management team are working closely with local contractors and equipment suppliers to establish the quickest possible timeline for reopening, Sauter said. So they probably have to do another grocery store and build it and put the things that people need in there. So we hope to have a clear understanding of the timeline in the coming weeks. But the community members have already begun planning for the future. So a group of neighbors is petitioning for a second Tops on the east side. Somebody asked me today, what do I want to see in 6 months? So the Reverend Julian Cook, the senior pastor of Macedonia Missionary, I want to see talks of another grocery store, another grocery option in the community, and a viable grocery option as well. So I'm not talking about putting some fruit and vegetable in a bodega, but others were where are working with officials to get rid of part of the highway, of course. And the 2022 budget proposed that Governor Kathy Hochul includes $1 billion to cover a portion of Route 33 and lake green space on top of it, creating a portion of the old Humboldt Parkway. So the project will take years to complete, and New York is competing with other states for funding as part of the President Joe Biden $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure plan. Now, see, this is sort of reminds me what they're doing is they're trying to go back in reverse to the way things were slowly, but it's not fast enough, too little, too late, and now we have these climate issues because of all of what has happened. So a lot of the it's fair to say that racism has created an environment that has also added to the climate crisis as well by building all these freeways, and you have all this traffic jam and all the smog and all this stuff like that, and then sending jobs to other places that aren't even in the U.S. and having people displaced moving around. And then if you have to get on the freeway to drive further to work, that's also contributing to the air quality. So all of the things that they have been doing based on hatred or separating and segregating and all this is has not it's actually, it's harmful not only to people, but it also is harmful to the planet, what they did and what some people are still trying to do. And so now they're trying to correct the wrongs, the sins of the people from the past, and then from the people that are even right now today still committing some of the same types of murders and crimes. They're trying to correct all this wrong, trying to go over every situation, and it seems like more of it's happening back to back, and some of it isn't. It's just senseless killing. Some of it's not even. There's no motive behind it except senseless killing or mental illness on top of war. It could be a mix of all of it, and that's what's happening. But it says the project might take years. It'll take years to complete. It's not even a might. So New York is competing with other states on funding. So the tunneling of a highway is only a start. And so the community leaders say the east side still needs to attract business to the area. So to do that, residents need more buying power. And so that requires generational wealth, of course. And here we get into that. That also was cut off by racism for most black families that didn't have a connection with somebody that might have had some type of wealth to bequeath to the children or grandchildren thereafter. And so Taylor said, which means affordable home ownership on property that can appreciate. And so residents are already wary of gentrification, and that has started a whole nother wave of displacing people. And it is doing it in real time. So in the meantime, community members say that they'll continue working with and help one another, even if the government officials and private businesses don't step in, which that seemed to have been the case in some instances. And then, or when they do step in, it takes years before you even hear from them, or months, or by the time the damage is done, here they come, you know. In the meantime, community members say that they'll continue working to help one another. And so, one recent morning, Andre and Sharif Kamochi, husband and wife, and the senior pastor of Rehoboth House of Prayer, backed a U-Haul truck into the Family Dollar parking lot and unloaded, by their math, 3,200 pounds of fresh food. And so a local produce wholesaler donated the items for them to distribute around the city. That afternoon, they had cucumbers, lemons, bananas, oranges, and melons. So the blessings of the Lord, Andrea said to one client, handing her a crate of 36 cucumbers, take a whole box. And so there's a video, I guess, attached to this. And so the leaders in Buffalo say the violent attack and the alleged white supremacist needs to be understood in the context of long-standing structural racism that has plagued the country. And so that's basically the whole article. And I just was looking at it. It was like a lot of it is what's happening everywhere. This is not just happening in Buffalo, but this has happened, when the people that were in the church, Dylan Roof, he went in there. He didn't just go to any church. He studied what church he was going to. And from what I heard, um, people that I know in South Carolina, people that were out that way, was telling me that he was looking to go to some other churches. He was looking to go to some other churches after he had killed those 9 people and the church shot them. He was looking for other. He was going to go to other churches, and there were specific black churches he was trying to go to. And so these people, they study, they know what churches, the neighborhoods, schools, all that kind of stuff. They try to study this stuff and try to figure out, well, who goes to those schools, who lives in those areas. So they they have enough um, knowledge to case those areas. So he might have been driving around it for maybe a week or two before he actually did the shooting. And so maybe some people saw him and he looked out of place. He looked like he's lost. Like, why is this person over here? And he looked like he doesn't know where he's going or whatever. He looks kind of lost. Um, Somebody that you don't normally see in the area, and he's just like back and forth looking at the same store, or he's looking at that school or something like that, or looking at the people that live around there, and he's just trying to find victims, people that he can terrorize, basically. And so that's the sad part about it. And this does not seem like something that is an isolated incident either. This is something that has happened throughout history, and it just keeps repeating itself. And so now it seems like now that we have all these little like diseases, the climate crisis, and all this stuff contributed to all of this. It contributes to it. The unsavory characters that create these social media platforms and these private chat rooms, and they don't monitor them. And the people they're looking at and that they're monitoring are people maybe because they have a political opinion, to the point to where they may say something, but it never really transpires into any violence. But people who have actually spoken words of violence on social media and actually put out blatant threats, those people are never really, you never see any action being done until you hear about these tragedies later on. And they're never taken serious, that because they think, oh, these are just kids, or oh, these people are not actually gonna, they're just saying all that stuff, and you're wondering, because I know some people who, like, they say one thing or one or two things that maybe a few people don't agree with, and they somehow their social media page is disrupted, or they erase your page or whatever. And but when it's like people like this guy that, like the Ulate shooter, he was on social media, he was following, he would harass teen girls, and he was in private chat rooms. He was saying things that he actually posted that he was going to shoot his grandmother and that he was going to shoot her school. And they didn't catch it until well, it wasn't even that far later that they caught it. But the fact that he was allowed to do that and they didn't catch that, and I've heard of other people, they say one thing about, if they say something about how they dislike racism, and they might be more passionate and emotional of it, all of a sudden they watching your page. They ready to erase you. But when it's somebody that's saying they're gonna come and do something to a school or something like that, they don't never catch them until you see this crazy stuff on the news. And so that's why I'm like, I just that right there, I was like, you mean to tell me? Then the other guy, guy that did this killing at the tops, he was on a social media platform. He actually posted the shooting on Twitch. He posted the killings, and somehow it was allowed to be on there, and nobody did nothing to him until finally they realized, oh, he's actually killing me. I just don't get it. I don't understand how they can let that kind of stuff happen like that. You know, they're so swift to get. Let me be just frank with you. It seemed like when, like, if I was like, let's say if I have an emotional video about some racial violence, and I say something and I have an opinion about it, all of a sudden my page is gonna be watched. And if I say I disagree with some Republican values, my page is watched. But if I'm, Rittenhouse, here I am, I don't even live in the area, but I decided to take a trip 22 miles away and purchase guns and go put myself in a situation that I don't even live there. And all of a sudden he become a hero and he actually shoots somebody and kills somebody. But he doesn't get any. He doesn't. I don't even think he really got that much jail time if he got any. And if he did, it wasn't. He. What I was hearing that the Republicans was paying for his lawyer fees, and they was treating him like he was a hero. And I just don't. To me, I feel like racism is just disguised now. It's like they use different language and different words to twist it around to make it seem like it it's acceptable, but it isn't acceptable in no way, form, or fashion. It's the same old racism that we've experienced that our people from before us that was here experienced. They just dressed it up now. It's fancier now. They use fancier words like redlining. We knew back then that was redlining. But now what is it? Luxury living. Are you priced out? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. There's killings. They were lynchings. Now we got shootings, deaths, and stuff. Mass shooting, massacres. Which that happened back then. This is now it's back to back. Now you got 18-year-old, 19 young killers out there reenacting all this stuff. Sick minds. People doing all this crazy stuff. Copycat killing. Stuff like that. And you don't have enough, eyes watching these folks. And it's sad. And that thing I don't want to say, which I really do believe, people see these things, and if they believe or they want to be seen, they have these views of hatred or whatever, they'll copy what they see, and it'll start all over again. And I almost don't like when they start talking that, even I know they have good intentions, they want to try to stop the gun violence, but it seems like when they start really focusing on talking about it, it seems like somebody sees that and they're like, you know what, I'll show you, and then they go out and do something crazy, like, let me show you, and innocent lives are taken once again. And yeah, but getting back to this when they talk about the highways and all this, and I mean, I don't know any city that they used to say these are isolated incidences. You would have people would say that, but why is it that every city that has black people, everybody that's black is experiencing similar circumstances? Uh, Food insecurity, housing issues, shootings, racial violence, hatred. Those aren't isolated incidences. It's a war going on out there. I mean, like they had the war in Russia and Ukraine and trying to take over and bombarding a whole country, saying it's ours, we could just take this. And Black Americans, for I don't know how long, for so many, so many years, so many decades, have been bombarded with terrorism, racial violence, hatred, and oppression. And we've tried everything to try to resolve those issues in political forms, in reforms, and trying to restructure things in cities, trying to elect officials. But it just seems like it turns back around. When you take 2, 3 steps forward, you go 5 steps back into history, an ugly past that we don't want to revisit, and we keep revisiting the same ugly hatred that we've seen our people experience before us. When is it ever going to end? That's the question.